The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday night, almost the weekend, almost OCON. Hope you guys are joining us in Austin, Texas for OCON 2021, the Objectivist conference. Austin, Texas is a hotbed of COVID, so Jesus, the fiasco that is COVID. Anyway, I was looking at the news to do a show for today and looking for something new to talk about, but the only thing in the news are COVID, and Afghanistan over and over and over again. It is true that one of the headlines is OnlyFans to ban sexually explicit content beginning October 1st. But since I don't know what OnlyFans is, nothing much I can say about them banning explicitly sexual content. So I'm tired of COVID. I've had enough. So I figured we'd return to Afghanistan. And you've seen the images coming out of Afghanistan today. We'll talk about some of those. We've seen how Joe Biden tried to defend his policy over and over again. There's quite a bit to talk about that. I listened to a General McMaster interview with Barry Weiss. Interesting. There's a lot to talk about that. And all this is going on. All this is going on while I'm, and I'm just reading headlines about Afghanistan, right? Defeat was inevitable, chaos in Kabul airport, fiasco, just on and on and on, headlines all over the place. And I also am reading OPA. OPA, for those of you who don't know, is Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. I'm reading it because I'm giving a talk on the importance of OPA. It's the 30th anniversary of OPA, and I'm giving a talk, the opening talk at OCON, and I'm talking about Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. And obviously, I'm rereading it for the, I don't know, fourth or fifth time, to kind of be in the right inspiration, I guess, so to have the concretes at my fingertips. And it's magnificent, by the way. If you have not read Objectivism, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff, you should. If you're interested in Ayn Rand's ideas, if you're interested in a philosophy in any way, it is the book to put it all together, to integrate it, to give you a unit that is Objectivism. So highly, highly recommend. Everybody read OPA. Daniel says he's reading Ominous Parallels. That's great. When you finish it, you should read OPA. Very different. Ominous Parallels is fantastic. I love that book. But OPA is more important in the sense, certainly in the sense of the Objectivist movement, and more important in the sense of just Objectivism as a system. All right, best friend Hank, thank you. Best friend Hank is just getting warmed up. Matt K, thank you. Really appreciate that. And I'm thanking them for making contributions on the Super Chat. You, of course, can make contributions on the Super Chat as well and ask questions. $20 or more get priority. But you don't just have to ask questions. You can also just contribute. And those of you who listen to it afterwards, you can do something called Applaud, which is a button right under the video. And Applaud allows you to throw in a little bit of money towards the video. And that can add up to significant amounts of support. Okay. So I was connecting. So what am I reading right now in OPA? I'm reading two chapters that I think are at the heart of Objectivism, two chapters that really define, make Objectivism Objectivism, and that define Ayn Rand's genius and integrate everything else. And the two chapters are on objectivity and reason. And the chapters really describe what it means to think, what it means to reason, and what it means to be objective about knowledge, about your concepts. And they talk about things like the fact that all knowledge must be integrated with all your other knowledge. And if there are conflicts, if there are contradictions, that's a violation of logic. That's when you have to go dig and figure out, is the new knowledge wrong? Is the old knowledge wrong? Why is it not integrating? What's the problem? At the end of the day, you want to have your knowledge integrated. That all your knowledge needs to be reduced to facts of reality. All knowledge has to ultimately be reducible to perception through a logical chain that connects it. And all knowledge, of course, ultimately is inductive knowledge, although he doesn't talk much about induction in OPA. He does that more in his later work. And reason, objectivity and reason. What does it mean to reduce? It means it has to be connected to reality, to facts. And then in under the chapter on reason, he talks about the arbitrary, and he talks about the fact that so many people have floating abstractions. They never connected to reality. And he talks about the fact that so many philosophers that reject reality, reject the reality of reality, whether it's Kant or Plato, the real reality is a mystical reality. The subjectivism that it implies, the intrinsicism that it often comes disguised as, those are the enemy of objectivity and objectivism. And that much of the world in which we live does not use reason, does not look for objectivity. And then I read the news in Afghanistan, and I read the headline, I listen to interviews like with McMaster, and I listen to Biden and everything, and they are, it's not that they're lying. I mean, to some extent they're lying. But it is that they are delusional. They are detached from reality. Their ideas, their notions, their beliefs, their wishes, their whims are not connected to what is going on in an actual world. And, they don't know what to do with that. They're continuously trying to justify their actions. They're continuously trying to figure out how to survive in spite of the fact that they're detached from reality, which is very difficult. They continuously make up stories to themselves. They continuously evade consequences, evade the past, evade past statements. And, beyond right now everybody's outraged, but broadly, nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. I mean, right now, the world in terms of Afghanistan is divided into the Biden kind of faction. Well, what could we do? We had to leave. I mean, after all, Trump signed an agreement to leave, and of course, Biden didn't say, but what was implied in that was, yeah, everything Trump wanted, I want, and everything Trump signed, I will continue to fulfill, right? Like all those executive orders that he's reversed. It's just bizarre. Nobody calls them on. They go up on stage and he says, "Oh, Trump signed an agreement to evacuate all American troops by May 1. What option did I have? What about all the other stuff Trump did that you had an option to reverse if you really wanted to? But more than that, we got to get out. We had to get out. There was no option. We got to get out." Some people say that. Then you've got people who basically agree with it. We have to get out. The Tucker Carlsons of the world saying, "Yeah, we had to get out. Why is everybody making such a fuss of this? The real incompetency here is we didn't get American citizens out sooner. To hell with Afghans. Who the hell cares about Afghans? We shouldn't settle them in the United States. We shouldn't fulfill our promises to them. We shouldn't help the ones who helped us. Just get the Americans out and let's forget about the whole place." And then you've got neocons and people on the left saying, no, we should have stayed there forever. We were making such amazing progress. Didn't you see just 2 weeks ago, women going to work in Kabul? This is a sign of progress and a sign that of the fact that we should have stayed because Afghanistan was becoming a better place. As if that's our job in the world, to make the world a better place. And everybody, nobody's got the right attitude. McMaster's trying to bridge it all, so he's better than most. The interview is very good. I recommend listening to the interview. It's on Barry Weiss's podcast. I think it was published today with McMaster. It's about an hour and a half. And he's quite articulate. He's quite good. He's delusional, again. Evasive, and buys into the conventional view of warfare. Although he argues that we needed to consolidate our victory. He claims we won in Afghanistan and we were busy consolidating it all. The only problem was the fraud. So he again is delusional in a different way. And there's no connection to reality. There's no emphasis on evidence. There's no looking at different scenarios, different possibilities. There's imposing some kind of fantasy world on the scenario with no real connection. And everybody's scrambling. And of course, one headline from The Guardian is defeat was inevitable. That's it. Defeat was inevitable. What are you surprised? And there's a lot on the left that defeat was inevitable. We should have left a long time ago. This is just American imperialism. America's pathetic. Moral equivalency, both on the left and on the right. And the people who are loving this are China and Russia. Putin today told Biden that the U.S. cannot keep military bases in Central Asia. Central Asia is a Russian zone, but out. What's Biden going to tell Putin? No, please let me in. Chinese are already preparing to cut deals with the Taliban. They had a Taliban delegation in China just a few months ago in anticipation of this. They want to work something out. Although they're tentative, they're worried because they've got their own Islamic uprising in the west of China, which they are trying to control with concentration camps, right? And we've got people in India who are, worried that they have bet on the wrong horse by being pro-American and standing up to the Chinese. Maybe they're wrong there. So it's a free-for-all out there. Our enemies are salivating. You've already got Islamist groups, the Islamic web. There's a whole web infrastructure of Islamist groups that it's celebrating this. This is the best thing that's happened to them since ISIS kind of disappeared off the map. Although ISIS is still around, and I haven't seen anybody with rational commentary on what's going on. I mean, let's start with Biden. Jacob Absel, percent of Afghans intellectually support the Taliban. Hard to tell. 20%, 30%, 40%. I don't know. Don't know that anybody knows. Biden was completely detached from reality. There's nothing we could have done about it. This was inevitable. Can't guarantee the safety of Americans. Today they had to revise their statement about saying, no, we're going to keep troops until all the Americans are out. But how are they going to get Americans who are stuck in Kandahar or in other cities around Pakistan, around Afghanistan? How are they literally going to get them out? Even ones in Kabul itself. The U.S. is not sending military into Kabul other than the airport. How are they going to get those Americans out of their homes in Kabul to the airport? I mean, the American military was there to protect, among other things, to protect the lives of Americans. They're going to desert them. They're going to leave them there. How are they going to manage all that? Well, maybe they'll negotiate a deal. How many billions of dollars do you think we can give the Taliban to get those Americans out? Because that's what it's going to come down to. We're going to bribe the Taliban to let our people out. Taliban's already turning people away from the airport. But Biden, complete evasion, delusion, has no clue. Our generals cannot tell us if there's a plan to get Americans out of Afghanistan. Everybody in decision-making positions seemed completely shell-shocked that this happened, completely anticipated. Although anybody who understands Afghanistan, who had some basic intelligence in both senses, should have known that this was a real possibility. Biden goes on to tell us that nation building was always futile in Afghanistan. It was never the goal of American troops to do nation building in Afghanistan. And it's enough. Enough is enough, right? We tried, failed. You can find a videotape, I think, of Biden, Senator Biden, in 2002, talking about the fact that we shouldn't go to Afghanistan unless our intent was to nation build. Yep, the same Joe Biden, in 2002, believed that the purpose of going to Afghanistan was to nation build, that we shouldn't come home immediately, that we shouldn't just win and come home, that we should stay there and build a thriving Denmark in Central Asia. I mean, without even an attempt to say I was wrong, God forbid a politician say I was wrong. Nothing. Biden getting number of troops wrong, the number of Afghan troops wrong. I mean, Biden blaming Afghan politicians and Afghan military for what happened after Afghan politicians and Afghan military were stabbed in the back by the Trump and Biden administration. Why would they stick around? You know, if they're going to lose all support. No one feared Trump. Give me a break, Hugh James, really. God. No one feared Trump. Putin didn't fear Trump. China didn't fear Trump. You forget that Hong Kong was taken over by the Chinese during the Trump administration. Trump's final year. Trump did nothing. Not a peep. Not a peep. But oh, Trump is tough. He would have never let this happen. It's interesting because I wrote this down. The way McMaster, remember General McMaster was Trump's national security advisor? Nobody fears Trump. Nobody fears Biden. Read John Bolton's book. I mean, really, nobody feared them. I mean, did you see Putin's body language with Trump? Did you see China's behavior under Trump? Zero sign of fear. Zero, nothing, nada. Nobody feared Trump. If you became Trump's enemy, he would hug you and claim you were his best friend. McMaster, who was Trump's national security advisor, calls Trump administration's agreement with the Taliban, Taliban who feared Trump. He calls it, and this is an agreement that Pompeo was primarily responsible for. Pompeo, another tough guy, CIA director, and a West Point graduate and everything. He calls that agreement a capitulation agreement. He elsewhere calls it a surrender agreement. The Taliban didn't fear Trump because Trump surrendered to the Taliban. McMaster, not me, McMaster, calls it, Trump's national security advisor, calls the Trump deal with the Taliban a surrender agreement. He compared it somewhat to Munich, to Chamberlain. That's how much the Taliban fear Trump. They negotiated with him in Doha, in Qatar. They had their team, we had our team. They, as equals, every time they came close to an agreement, the Taliban would kill some Americans. And then Trump would back off of the agreement, then he would come back to negotiate at the table and give them more just to get out of there quicker. Taliban feared Trump more than they feared Biden. They didn't fear either one of them. Zero fear. Nothing. Because there was nothing to fear. We had communicated explicitly to the world, to the Taliban, that we had no interest in staying. We had no interest in defeating them. We wanted to hand over power peacefully. We'd like them to negotiate a deal. We'd like them to be in bed together with the other Afghans. We'd like women to participate. You know, Pompeo, under Trump, said that the Taliban would kill the terrorists for us. I mean, talk about delusion, detached from reality, placing wishes and whims above the facts. Delusional completely. Iran never took our soldiers hostage under Trump. No, they just killed our troops in Iraq under Trump, continuously shelled them, bombed them, and yeah, Trump took out one of their generals. Cool. Didn't stop them from continuing to kill Americans before and after. Try to kill them at least after they were less successful. I mean, Biden as a personality is a walkover, but in reality, in actual action, in actually what they do, they're all walkovers. Obama was pathetic. Completely the world walked over him, and he accepted it because what's so special about America? Well, there's nothing special about America. There's no American exceptionalism. There's nothing unique about America. There's nothing superior about America. So he allowed the world to walk all over us. Absolutely. Russia did what it wanted under Obama. And Trump was the same way. Nobody took him seriously. Nobody took him seriously as defending American interests. People walked all over us. The Russians walked all over us. The Chinese walked all over us. And the Taliban, certainly the Taliban, walked all over us. And Biden is the same. Yeah, Biden as a personality is super weak. He's also cognitive, not all there. But in terms of actual policy, they all have no concept of what it means to defend American interests because they have no concept what America is. They have no concept what interests are. You have to actually have a solid understanding of what America is. And it's not, as Tucker Carlson would define it, beautiful scenery and a love of God. That's how Tucker Carlson defines American exceptionalism. It's a beautiful country and we love God. I did a whole segment of a show with video from him saying exactly that. No, America is an idea. And at the foundation of that idea is an American government, not a foundation, but protecting that idea is an American government, supposedly, that protects your rights as an individual. That's the idea. It's the idea of individualism. And in defending those rights, the lives and property of Americans need to be defended, protected. Not the rights of Afghans. McMaster in this interview even mentions just war theory. Although he doesn't give it a lot of respect. He doesn't talk a lot about it, unfortunately. I would have liked him to talk about it. So what we got in Afghanistan is complete delusion. A Trump administration, and to some extent a Biden administration, who believe the Taliban, they probably changed, they're much better, we can negotiate with them, because negotiating with evil always works, or mostly works. So we can negotiate with them, we can get deals with them, they take over, it's no big deal, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine. Yeah, McMaster hates Biden, grilled Biden, and then grills Trump. He despises Trump. Right? If you read what he wrote about Trump, despises Trump. And he knows he was right there for 2 years, national security advisor. Despises Pompeo. Despises many of the people in the Trump administration who ultimately determined Afghanistan policy. So you've got complete delusion. Separation from reality, in other words. A view that is just, it doesn't matter. You know, they say, they do, whatever they think is expedient, whatever they think will work electorally, whatever they think will work with your audience, whatever they think they can get away with. But there's no sense, and this is certainly true of Trump, but also true of Biden, to a less extent, I think. There's no sense of any concern about, but what is reality? And even the better people, like McMaster, are limited in how they look at reality. Because, for example, actually saying we botched the operation in Afghanistan in the first few days because we didn't go all out and crush and devastate the enemy is not something that he can afford to contemplate because of altruism, because of just war theory, because of what is taught at West Point. So he limits himself. He limits, by limiting himself, he limits the scope of reality and the things in reality he can see and he can criticize. He just blinds himself to most of the possibilities. He says we need he's a believer that we should have stayed in Afghanistan because we need to make sure that it doesn't become a base of terrorism against us. And the only way to do that is keep troops there forever, just like we do in Germany and Japan. And he can't conceive of the idea of devastation, of crushing. He talks about Pakistan as being a haven for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And he can't conceive, or he won't afford to conceive, or he can't say, yeah, we could have taken out Pakistan. Or at least we could have intimidated Pakistan into doing our bidding in destroying the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But those possibilities don't exist in his world. Altruism shrinks your scope of thinking. And then if you're not committed to reason, if you're not committed to reality, if you're not committed to looking at the facts, if you're not going to be objective, then the possibilities shrink. All the options become bad options, staying there for 50 years or leaving immediately, right? False alternatives, one on top of the other. And mainly because these people can't think. It shrinks their scope of thinking, shrinks the possibilities, possible outcomes. Now, right now, for example, altruism, you can see it all over the place. I mean, Afghanistan was such a wonderful place while we were there. And we should have stayed there to make sure Afghanistan stays a wonderful place. Like women can go to school and all that stuff. I mean, that's all good, but how many Americans are supposed to die to make that happen? How many? Barry Weiss. I would love to ask Barry, who's very concerned about the fact that we've given up on nation building. We should have stayed to continue the nation building. How many Americans, how many families of Americans have to suffer for a more peaceful, women-loving Afghanistan? How many American kids have to die because they're not allowed to shoot at the enemy because of just war theory and rules of engagement that tie their hands behind their back, which people like McMaster were responsible for? How many? Watch that movie I recommended, The Outpost, and hopefully that'll outrage you. What we see is that the world around us has no commitment to the facts of reality. No commitment to reason, no commitment to objectivity, no commitment to facts, no commitment to reality. And if you come to them, if I went to McMaster and said, we could have crushed them right off the beginning, we could have wiped them off the face of the earth, the Taliban. Why didn't we do that? He would say things like, no, we really couldn't have. And I would have said, yeah, here's a few things. Here's a few ways we could have bombed them into oblivion. Oh, he would have said, you can't do that. That would have been immoral. That would have been, what would the world say? What would the international community say? We would be monsters. We would be no better than the other side. And he's complaining about moral equivalency, but he would be making the moral equivalency argument. He does say at some point that in war you have to convince the enemy that you have won. And I agree completely. In war, you have to convince the enemy you have won. The best way to do that is to crush the enemy. It's to bring them to their knees. It's to inflict massive amounts of pain on the enemy. And then they realize, oh, we lost. Maybe we should do things differently next time. There's so much. If you remember, under Obama, he increased the troops at some point in Afghanistan. There was a surge, but he said when he announced the increase, right? When he announced the increase, he said. Within 18 months, they're all going to leave. So he basically told the enemy, don't worry, we're going to leave in a few months. So just stay cool, stay in the background, don't intervene, and then when we leave, you can start all over again. I mean, what military strategist tells the enemy what you're going to do in the future? So then Trump comes on. I remember the speech Trump gave, and he says, well, I'm not going to do what Obama did. That was stupid. You don't tell the enemy when you're going to leave. So we're going to do a mini surge, just a little surge. We're going to send in extra troops to Afghanistan. And I'm not going to tell them when to leave. But by the way, we're going to leave. I am committed to getting every single last troop in Afghanistan out. So I'm not going to tell you exactly when, but sometime, soon. And then in the meantime, I'm going to negotiate with you for a capitulation agreement or surrender agreement, as McMaster calls these agreements, that Trump signed. Trump negotiated. Don't let him off the hook. Thomas, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. Don't forget, guys, Ali still has the same goal. Even though you raised a lot of money yesterday, she's not giving up. She's got the same goal. See, the thing about yesterday's show is it was a fun show. I really enjoyed it. We made a lot of money. We got a lot of money raised, $800 and something, I think. But very few people watched the show. It's like so far a few hundred thousand people watched it since we put it up. That's on YouTube. Many more people watch it, listen to it on a podcast. And like, I know any show I do on new stuff is going to easily reach 2,000 people. And it's frustrating that these shows are double what those shows are. But anyway, that's the reality. So I have to mix them up. I have to do both kind of shows to get as many as we can. Scott says McMaster has said very few U.S. casualties in recent years in defense of staying indefinitely, as if very few is okay. Yeah, how many is very few? Your children? Neighbors' children? Somebody else's children, certainly. But it's one thing if you can make the compelling case that this is the most cost-effective in lives and in money way to protect American interests. And I agree, you can't let the Taliban rule Afghanistan. It's not good for American self-defense, for American interests. But is placing a permanent American force in Afghanistan the best way to protect American interests? No, the best way is to crush the Taliban. I keep saying that. All right. God, I had a thought a minute ago. And by the way, crush the Taliban also means penalize the funders, whether they're Saudis, Qataris, United Arab Emiratis, Kuwaitis, whoever has the money, whoever's giving. The Taliban has a lot of money. Now, some of it comes from them growing heroin and selling it. One way to destroy that is to legalize heroin, and then their profit margins will shrink to zero. So that's one way you could destroy the finance of the Taliban. But they also get money from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from Qatar, from United Arab Emirates. And then on top of that, and Iran, by the way, I'm sure they get money from Iran, although Iran is in pretty dire straits financially. So you could legalize heroin, which you should do anyway. That would take their money source away. You could penalize all these other countries for supporting them. And you could go after the Pakistanis. We could go after the Pakistanis who give them shelter and support and weapons and everything else. Well, now they don't need weapons because you know what weapons they have now. They have all the American weapons that we gave to the Afghan army. The Taliban has them now. That was a good investment. Good investment. Now our enemies have our weapons. All right. People still support Trump. You know, you give facts like peace treaty with the Taliban, capitulation treaty, you know, a surrender treaty, according to his own national security advisor, and people still defend Trump. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter. This is delusion, lack of objectivity, lack of reason. No matter what I say, no matter what evidence I produce, people will not criticize Trump. And then I wonder why the world out there is not objective, when the world right in here in the Iran Book Show can't be objective. We are dying, in a sense, from bad epistemology, for the inability to actually reason, to be objective about the world. We're carried away by emotions. We hate the left so much that we'll tolerate anything from the right. Anything. Doesn't matter what they do. We will grovel. We will, yes, sir. You're better than the left. Yes, sir. Do whatever you want to me. You know. Sign away, America writes. Get Americans killed. Kids killed. By the way, one of the reasons McMaster could say fewer U.S. casualties in recent years in Afghanistan is because of the fact that the Taliban knew that the United States was going to retreat and didn't want to piss us off, didn't want to get us all agitated so that we would stay. So they backed off a little bit. Completely rational of them. What else did I want to say? Biden's speech, and he did an interview for an NBC. The extent to which the guy is delusional and detached from reality, and of course, he makes stuff up. And he's trying to justify a policy that clearly is unjustifiable. At least acknowledge that we made a massive intelligence error. At least acknowledge that you didn't evacuate Americans out of Afghanistan in time, and you screwed up. But modern politicians have no capacity to acknowledge their mistakes. They don't know what that looks like. It's so foreign to them. Okay, let's do some $20 questions. It's understood that many radical Islamist groups, including the Taliban, have been funded with Saudi money. Why is America friendly with Saudis? Why no one talks about the life of women in Saudi Arabia? Yeah, good question, right? People talk about the Taliban as if the Taliban invented Sharia. They talk about the Taliban as if the Taliban invented covering women up, as if the Taliban invented not letting women drive or go to school. Our ally, our best friend in the world. Do you remember do you know what Trump's first international visit was? First international trip was to Saudi Arabia. There were those pictures of him dancing with the sheiks. Literally dancing. It was embarrassing. With the sheiks. And of course, all the women around covered up in servitude. So vile, whatever the word is. Yeah, but no, he's better than Obama and Biden. So stop criticizing Trump, because anything he did is excusable because he's not a leftist. He was dancing. I remember the video. Israel is in de facto alliance with Saudi Arabia. Israel will pay a price for being de facto alliance with Saudi Arabia. Israel is no better. You want me to start criticizing the Israeli government? Happy to do that. Happy to do that. But if we worry about women's rights, why aren't we worried about Saudi Arabia? We're worried about freedom and liberty, freedom of the press. Why didn't we worry when the Saudis hacked to pieces a Washington Post journalist who was critical, who was Saudi, but who was critical of the Saudi Arabia? We didn't care. Trump didn't care. The Trump administration didn't care. Neither would have Biden or anybody. Now, why are we friendly with Saudis? Because we kind of deal with them, during World War II under FDR, kind of deal with them, basically saying, you give us oil, we'll protect you. And we've had that deal since then. Now, at some point, we produced more oil than Saudi Arabia. But now, but it hasn't changed because the interests, the crony interests of America and the Saudis are too intermingled, are too linked and connected. So American presidents are super friendly to Saudi Arabia. Even when they embargoed oil on us in the 70s, we did nothing. And today we do nothing. And it's shocking that we continue our relationship with Saudi Arabia, in spite of the fact that, as I said, there's reason to believe that certain people in the intelligence services of Saudi Arabia knew about 9/11 or maybe helped the terrorists in one way or the other, whether they knew exactly what their plans were or not. Bush evacuated the Saudis out of New York before anybody else, in Washington, before anybody else, only plane up in the air right after 9/11. Saudi Arabian business interest, cultural interest. Saudis have spent huge amounts of money on American universities. Middle East studies programs all over the United States are funded by Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have charmed their way into the salons of all the important people in New York and in Washington, D.C., both on the right and on the left. The new prince, on the one hand, claims to be pro-Western and a reformer. On the other hand, arrests all the women who advocate for rights and killed the journalist, slaughtered the journalist. But he's for Western values. He's going to change Saudi Arabia. And we grovel before them. We have since World War II, the United States has no confidence, no self-esteem, no backbone, no willingness to stand up for our values. The left, whenever you bring up Saudi Arabia, they go, well, their culture's their culture, our culture's ours. They don't say that about Afghanistan. This is the delusional. This is, Nicholas, this is exactly and nobody sees the hypocrisy and the double-faced nature of all of this. Nobody cares. Nobody thinks. Nobody integrates. Ian says, just wanted to thank you for putting up such a great show yesterday on dealing with setbacks. Thanks, Ian. Really appreciate it. It's great. Let's see some other ones on what we're talking about. Michael says, Andrew Bernstein and Bosch Fatwin are saying we need Trump now more than ever. How can sophisticated objectivist intellectuals be spouting this? You're going to have to ask them. I'm not gonna get into a insider. Obviously I disagree, but you're gonna have to ask them how they can spout it. Tom says, let's imagine the U.S. handled their response to 9/11 morally and actually identify the enemy as radical Islam. How should Muslim citizens living in the U.S. have been treated? I think that they should have been under intense scrutiny from the NSA and from security services, from FBI and so on. I think I'm all for racial profiling in that context. I think that particularly radical mosques should have been infiltrated and monitored and scrutinized. But most Muslims, or overwhelming majority of Muslims in the United States, are not, Islamists. They're not jihadis. But we should have watched them to figure out who is. And more importantly, if we had dealt with 9/11 properly, if we had courageously, emphatically, unequivocally destroyed our enemies, then a lot of radical Islamists would have changed their stripes, colors, whatever you want to call it. They would have changed their views. Because nobody is going to advocate for an ideology, certainly not die for an ideology that's losing. It's why terrorist attacks in the name of ISIS have basically gone to zero. Why? Because ISIS was defeated. It's non-existent today, really. I mean, it's still out there in different parts of the world, and there's still some ISIS in Syria and Iraq. But as a powerful force, it's gone. So people are not knifing people and committing suicide in the name of a group that's lost. You don't do that. That's the power of winning. The power of winning is you deflate the energy, the passion, the commitment of people who think they can win. So I think the way you treat Muslims in America is, in a sense, on a case-by-case basis. You try to identify those who are threats, and everybody else you treat like any other member of the U.S., right? And if you win quickly, and you move on. How exactly did ISIS end? In a combination of the fact that the Syrian regime, the Russians, the the Kurds, and the United States pounded away at them long enough and consistently enough that they went away. And ultimately, I guess there was a raid that killed the leader of ISIS in northern Syria, close to the Turkish border. ISIS made some strategic mistakes by alienating the Turks. Turkey was in a sense a supporter of ISIS quietly on the side, and then ISIS started attacking Turkey, and that was really bad for ISIS because it cut off their means of getting supplies, support, money, other things. Big strategic mistake. What was the argument to stay there to maintain a base of operations to fight terrorists? I mean, that's McMaster's argument, that we should have stayed in Afghanistan to continue forever, basically, to continue a base of operations against people like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and so on. But it's not needed, not if you defeat the Taliban first, not if you penalize Pakistan the way it should be penalized for helping our enemies, not if you engage in a foreign policy of America first. Real America first, not the caricature of America first that was Trump. You don't need that. You defeat the enemy, and then you can attack that enemy through the air, at least, and through special forces from bases in the Indian Ocean, from bases, maybe if you keep bases in Central Asia. Some of the Central Asian countries, we have landing rights. There's lots of ways in which you can handle it. But that's more military strategy. Thessi asks, a UN document says the Taliban are intensifying their hunt for people who worked for and collaborated with NATO and US forces. Yeah. Of course. They're going to kill them. They're going to torture them. Maybe right now they'll do it quietly because they don't want to bring the US back into the war. But it's going to be a disaster. So, yes, this is exactly what Taliban is doing. And next to women, and next to the schools are going to close. They're going to try to convince the world for a while that they've changed, that they're nicer, they're better. They're going to try to get America. They're going to try to get America to give them money. They're going to try to get the world community to give them money. And then they're going to revert to their old selves, which is oppressive, murderous, torturous theocracy. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw the best image today out of Afghanistan. I mean, there were a lot of interesting images out of Afghanistan, but the best image was the demonstrations. I don't know if you saw this, but women in Afghanistan, in Kabul, going out into the streets and demonstrating against the Taliban. Same in 7 or 8 other different cities. Afghans themselves standing up against the Taliban. Now, how long that'll last, how soon will the Taliban use their brutality to silence them? Hard to tell. But, wow, the courage and the bravery of those women. If only we had the courage like that to demonstrate and to stand up to the Taliban in the streets. And then the other image that struck me was the image of parents passing their children to American soldiers to take into the airport. And climbing up the walls, and the American troops taking children over the wall. Don't know how long that can last. Don't know how many kids they can take. I think they're taking the parents too, or at least one of the parents. Truly good for the American troops, but truly scary that this is what we've come to, that's what's going on. All right, we're at about $200, which is about a third of where we need to be, which is $600, so $198.97. So we'd love to get some more $20 questions. All right, let's keep going. But yes, feel free to support the Yaron Brook Show by contributing. You can do monthly contributions at yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do it on Locals, Patreon, Subscribestar. And value for value. If you get value from the show, please reflect that value back with trade with me by supporting the show financially. And I appreciate all of your support. I know some of you can't afford it a lot and give what you can. Some of you give a lot of money, and I really appreciate that. It's heartening to see the amount of support the Yaron Brook Show gets by Super Chat and through with the monthly contribution as well. So thank you all for continuing to do that. Okay, Thessi. Do you think with this happening in Afghanistan makes other shady countries, terrorists, now more likely to walk over the United States and the rest of the world? Yeah, no question. No question. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few months, once things quieten down in Afghanistan and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda get settled in there, that you start seeing more problems in Syria and Iraq. That maybe you start seeing problems elsewhere in the Middle East. I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to embolden the Iranians and encourage them to even be more belligerent than they already are. Certainly, you're going to see China have a lot less patience with the U.S. Russia already has told the U.S. That it considers itself the dominant power in Central Asia, and for the United States to butt out, to leave Afghanistan and leave the whole of Central Asia to the Russians. But you're going to see Islamists all over the world celebrating. And I don't know how long it'll take, but Islamic terrorism will come back. It has not completely disappeared. It is waiting for its next hero. It had bin Laden, then it had the guy who headed up ISIS. It needs that in order to fuel itself. But our weakness only emboldens the bad guys. And, and we've seen a lot of weakness from America's side over the last couple of years. Why should these people think they have evaded reality for decades and take the producer's wealth by force? They are very deep into a web of evasion. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. The sad thing is, they are into the web of evasion. They, you could argue, have something to gain, in quote, it's not real gain, but because they are part of this web, they've been in it forever. They they've gained power from it, and they've stolen wealth through it. But the real evasion of reality is going on among all of us. I mean, you can see some of it here by evading, by evading the consequence of the Trump administration. But you see it, people on the left evading what Biden's doing, people on the left and right evading what the military has done, what the military will do. All of that. So the evasion is the American people. I understand those in power. Get something from the evasion, but the rest of us are only suffering. Get something again, get in quotes, because it's not a real get. It's not a real benefit. All right, let's see. We've got more questions here. Some of these are not necessarily related. Objectivists claim most automatic emotional responses are based on early conclusions we come to subconsciously or consciously. Could be consciously. How do they know this is? How do they know it's not hardwired, automatized genetic response to stimuli? Well, I mean, you can run a simple experiment. You can take two different people with two completely different contexts of knowledge, different conclusions, different values, different conclusions they've come to in life, and show them exactly the same thing. Tell them exactly the same story. And they will both respond emotionally completely differently based on what they're bringing to hearing the story or seeing the image. I mean, Leonard Peikoff uses one of the best examples ever in OPA. I just read it, right? He says, they put up on a screen an image taken from a slide, a cross-cut of some tissue. So it's got blotches, like cells, and you know what it looks like, blotches of stuff, right? And you bring in 6 different people to look at this slide, right? The first one is somebody you've just plunked out of the jungle of the Amazon, knows nothing, and he looks at it, and it means nothing to him. Just blotches of stuff, and it's just nothing, right? You bring somebody else who's, an artist, and knows nothing about the world except art, and he looks at it, and he let's say he's even a good artist, he's a realist artist, and you look at it and he says, this is like some crummy Kandinsky painting. This is terrible. This is not objective art. Get this out of here. I hate this. And he has a negative response. Or you bring somebody in who's a scientist who sees in the slide the solution to a problem he's been working on for 20 years. And he is elated. And you bring into the place a patient who, for him, the slide represents the identification of a deadly disease that he will probably not recover from. And he feels depressed, right? So your emotions are not just an automatic response to the stimuli. Your emotions are a direct response to the identification based on your context of knowledge of what's on the slide and what value significance that has to you. Is it a threat? Is it a good thing? Is it something to be celebrated? Is it something to fear? Is it something to embrace? Is it something to run away from? So you can test this. You can see that people respond to different artwork. People respond to different stories in the media. People respond to Biden. People respond to the war in Afghanistan in very different ways. And that you can predict how they will respond to it emotionally based on what ideas they hold, based on what ideas they've automatized. So it's from the facts of reality, from the evidence that you have, you come to this conclusion. Michael asked, it amazes me how irrational, evasive, and unthinking 99% of people are. The lights still turn on. The water comes out of my faucet. I guess meritocracy is still alive and well in business. I don't like the term meritocracy. Meritocracy is the rule of those of merit. Meritocracy is like the Chinese system where you pass exams to become a bureaucrat to rule over everybody else. So don't use the term meritocracy to describe people's self-interested motivation to make a profit and to work and the existence of markets and businesses that still function. That's not meritocracy. It is true that business still functions. It is true that people are unthinking in some areas of their life and thinking in others. That for the most part, people are rational in their day-to-day lives, in the way they handle themselves, and in their jobs. I mean, one of the examples I always give is you drive down a California highway at, 80 miles an hour, and everybody's driving 80 miles an hour, and there are hundreds, thousands of cars next to you and in front of you, behind you, driving, and accidents are rare. That takes a lot of rationality, a lot of control to do that. Let a bunch of monkeys drive a car at 80 miles an hour, everybody would be killing each other. It would be complete mayhem and destruction. So people are more rational than you think on the day-to-day stuff. All right, remind everybody you can ask questions. We got 3 more questions and then we're done. It'll be a short show. We've also got a bunch of money still to raise, so we're at 219. We should at least get to the 400. We always get to, where's best friend Hank, who started out this whole thing and has kind of disappeared, gone away. We've got another, at least $180 to get to the $400 or the $600 and to support the show. I see I have 2 thumbs down. I know why, because I guess I went after Trump too much. I always get the thumbs down when I mention Trump. You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. The Taliban got Hank. I think so. I think it was those pork steaks that, pork chops that he was cooking pissed him off, and he's gone. He's always barbecuing while the show is on. Oh, here's a question by best friend Hank, and it's I forgot. We have a question from him. What do you think will be the surprise domestically or abroad concerning America? I don't know. How can you predict a surprise? The whole point of a surprise is you can't predict it. Best friend Hank says the mosquitoes got him. Where do you live that your mosquitoes got you? David, thank you. That's very generous. Excellent. Thank you. That gets us much closer to where we need to be. David just gave $50. I don't know. I don't know what the surprise is going to be. I'm surprised the extent to which Trump has somehow maintained his grip on the Republican Party. That truly did, as bad as I think the Republicans have become, I thought they would wake up after the loss. And no, his grip on the Republican Party seems stronger than ever. That to me is surprising. I don't know if that's going to hold. I think it probably will. But again, I don't know what surprise means here, because I think people will be surprised at how quickly the Taliban and Al-Qaeda work together again, or are working together, but will be out in the open. Thanks, Fab006. I appreciate that. Every small amount helps. And just your support helps. Just knowing that you guys are supporting me helps. Yeah, we'll see. I think what's going on with COVID in Florida now is going to really hurt DeSantis's chances. I think he's going to get. I don't think he's going to be the nominee. I don't know who is, but I don't think it's going to be DeSantis. I don't know what the surprises aboard are going to be. China's going to continue to increase its influence as the United States disappears from the world stage. and is perceived as weak. Russia is going to assert itself more on Europe, significantly more on Europe, as the same thing happens. But I don't think any of those surprises, not anybody with eyes. One of the interesting anti-concepts that's out there, I was listening to Barry Weiss and this interview with McMaster, and she's talking about neo-isolationists. And the idea is Haley's not going to be the nominee. Trump destroyed Haley. She will not be the nominee because Trump will be anti-Haley. And to win the nomination, you're going to have to be supported by Trump. And I predicted this. I predicted that Haley, that one of the victims of Trumpism would be Nikki Haley, who I thought was good once upon a time. So one of the concepts that's gaining traction out there is this idea, or anti-concept, is this idea of neo-isolationism. But isolationism is an anti-concept because it's grouping together two different things. It groups together the idea of self-defense. America will intervene in the world to defend itself and only to defend itself, with America is just going to retreat from the world, not intervene at all. So it groups. So am I an isolationist because I don't think we should be in 150 different countries, and I'm an isolationist because I think those troops should come home, even in South Korea, even from Germany, that we don't really need them over there? Is that isolationist? Not when I say, but when somebody attacks us, like 9/11, we should crush and destroy the enemy. We should occupy land. We should put ground troops in. We should bomb and destroy whoever gets in the way of violating our rights. That doesn't sound isolationist. But so this neo-isolationism is a term that means nothing, and it's supposed to lump me together with the people who just want to retreat from the world completely. I want to protect the shipping lanes, lower tariffs to zero. I've been accused many, many times of being a globalist. I want immigration, I want free trade, I want open shipping lanes, and I want to tough America on its enemies, and I want all the troops home. Stefan says, I live in Puerto Rico, that is isolation. Isolation from what? There are plenty of people here, good food, not isolated from the ocean, from the beach, not isolated from the beach. All right, guys, we need $118, $117 to get to $400. I've lowered the threshold. I'm going to keep talking until we get to the $400. So if you want me to shut up, then no, I shouldn't promise that because some of you want me to keep talking and not stop. So, all right, Scott says, enjoyed last night's show a lot in terms of traction. I noticed this has the basic blue YBS thumbnail. Don't underestimate the impact of eye-catching thumbnails and algorithm. Maybe we can create a thumbnail that's unique for the Iran Rules shows. I'll talk to Action Jackson about maybe creating a thumbnail for those that attract a different attention, or differentiate them. But maybe that works. It's hard to tell. I mean, the short videos all have creative thumbnails, but all the live shows have kind of the same thumbnail. Florida Nick, thank you. Appreciate it. We're a little closer to $600. We just need like a Troy to come in with, $500 Australian dollars, and bam, we're exactly where we need to be. Where are my whales? Yeah. Where are all the whales from last year? A lot of those whales have disappeared. Notice we haven't seen a lot of them? It's interesting how the ebb and flow of participation on Super Chat and on the chat generally on the Ron Brook Show changes over time. Who is there? How many people are there? The dollars. I mean, it's interesting. All right, last two questions. Is it moral to trade with a dictator as a private company? David. Okay, go enjoy your night. You deserve it. David just got us to $400. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Almost $400. $16 short. Is it moral to trade with a dictator as a private company, Saudi Arabia, knowing how they will use the funds? No, it's not. It is not moral to trade with a dictator. Ah, Renee, $99. Thank you. Wow, you guys are really showing up. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Yes, David did get us over 400. Renee has got us to 500. So we're doing great. Really appreciate the support, guys. Thank you. David, a little bit more to get us over the hump. Thank you. So no, as I've said in the past, it's not right of individuals to trade with a dictator. Now, it doesn't mean that every time you trade with a person under dictatorship, you're trading with a dictator because, for example, a lot of Chinese companies are pseudo-private companies, and the money goes to the owners, and profit gets to be kept in China. Taxes are lower than they are in the U.S. But to trade with the Saudi government, which is what you're doing when you trade with Saudi Arabia, because they don't dominate every part of their economy, but certainly oil is all owned by the royal family. Or if you trade with a government-owned business in China, you shouldn't do that. I mean, one of the things I'd like to see is labeling on Chinese goods what is private and what is state-owned enterprise. That would be cool. I'd like importers to differentiate between the two. That'd be cool. And you as an individual then can choose what Chinese goods you want to buy and what Chinese goods you don't want to buy. Same with Vietnam. Same with a lot of authoritarian countries. You want to make sure, like Cuba, there's no private anything. All the money goes to the Cuban government. So when you go visit Cuba, you're supporting the Cuban government. That's why I won't go to visit Cuba. Wow. Adam, thank you. Really appreciate that. To combat our culture of constantly having altruism affecting our business, politics, and military, I just asked everyone on the chat to ask someone to read Atlas Shrugged this week. I'm still here. Thanks, Adam. Yes, great idea. Just get one person to read Atlas Shrugged this week, or to start it. If they don't get it from Atlas Shrugged, where are they going to get it from? And we made it to $600. Thank you, guys. Okay. So, yes, nothing more important than getting Atlas Shrugged into the hands of young people, particularly young people. And they don't read. That's part of the problem. It's really an enormous challenge that we all face, is the young people don't read. Bree asks, it's a $20 question. Afghanistan is expected outcome of 20 years of the U.S.'s best and brightest central planners. Excellent point. It is a mistake to engage with the discussion about politics. Focus on the failure of central planning of any party. I agree, it's central planning, but it's central planning because it's an area in which you expect central planning, national defense. But once you get away from national defense, once you move into building countries, as a political entity, you're going to fail. And once you reject the idea of winning as an act of self-defense, you're going to fail. So this is a massive debacle of delusionary thinking, fantasy thinking, detachment from reality, lack of reason, lack of objectivity. And it's the same thing that goes into central planning. How can you plan an economy? How can you plan how much bread to produce? To think that you can do it is a sign of a lack of reason, delusional thinking, evasion. It's all the same principles. Our politicians, left and right, are delusional. They think they can centrally plan our lives. Even the Afghans' lives. Just destroy the enemy and come home. Alex writes, thank you, Alex. That's very generous. Now we're really rocking. My life is at the low point from a decade ago struggle, with a decade-long struggle with depression and anxiety. I'm afraid if I tell people I'm an objectivist, I'll judge it as flawed based on the state of my life. Should I not tell people I'm an objectivist? I mean, you have to decide what's in it for you. It's not an issue of whether they'll condemn objectivism or not condemn objectivism. You have to be selfish about this. And if it'll help you to let them know you have a particular philosophy of life and this is how you're living, then you should tell them. It's not your job to sacrifice for the cause. Keep the illusion alive so that objectivism doesn't get a bad name. Your focus should be on how you can get healthy, how you can overcome depression and anxiety, how you can reorient your life. Don't worry about the perception of objectivism. Focus on making your life as good as you can make it, on overcoming the challenges. Get help if you need it, but don't say, this will look bad for objectivism. Don't worry about that. And to the extent that the problem is psychological, which there probably are, it's good to get help. It's good to get help. But thank you for the support. That's very generous. Scott says, on the topic of trade with authoritarians, what about part of the company you work for, large, with many subsidiaries, providing services for a company like Amoco, Saudi State Oil? I mean, look, it's impossible to avoid working for people who are in bed with the status in some way or another. I mean, even if you work in Silicon Valley, how many of those companies sell products to the U.S. government that then uses it to spy on us, or operate in China and help the Chinese government develop technology that spies on their own people, or work for the Saudi State Oil or whatever? It's just impossible in the world in which we live to avoid that, unfortunately. To the extent that you have power over these things, like you have control, then you should avoid them, helping the statists. But you can't sacrifice for that larger goal. You can't not have a job because you can't work for anybody who's going to be involved in the mixed economy or support bad players out there in the world. I mean, I'm sure there's a point in which you would say, whoa, I'm not doing that. But it's hard because government is everywhere. It's imposing itself on everything. Adam says, with regard to the Atlas Shrugged recommendation, they don't read and the movie version sucks. It really does. But a movie, no matter what, a movie is not going to be able to replace Atlas Shrugged. My view, I've always had this view, the only reason to make a movie is to get people to read the book. So make as good a movie as you can. Entertaining, exciting, with big actors, so lots of people see it, so they're intrigued by it and go read the book. And that means, you don't have to be 100% loyal to the book. I mean, I think there are a number of characters that could be cut if you made a movie of it. You'd have to shrink the story down significantly. Right? Yeah, there's only one version of the movie of Atlas Shrugged, and it sucked. It was awful. Okay, Ryan says, my local university has announced mandatory vaccination to attend. I agree private organization can do as they wish, but publicly funded universities is funded by me, by tax, and I'm not sure I agree. Am I wrong? It's tricky, but Ayn Rand always said that you have to treat these entities, even though they're funded by the state, as private. Otherwise, there's no end to it, right? You fund the roads. What does that mean exactly, right? Vlad, thank you. That's really appreciate that. So, I mean, the Supreme Court just ruled basically that the University of Indiana is like a private institution it can make the rules, right? Because your tax money's funding the university, does that mean you should be able to vote on what curriculum they have? Do we give politicians? I mean, we treat these entities as pseudo-private entities, and I think as long as they exist, that is the best way to approach them, to allow them to make their own rules with regard to things like vaccination. And I think it's wrong, for example, for the states to step in like they have in Texas and say, basically pass a law that says universities can't make that decision for themselves. So the state is forcing them to decide one way, not the other. Or like, you guys' favorite governor, the guy in Florida, telling cruise lines they couldn't demand that all their passengers have vaccines. Why not? They're private businesses. Well, the schools should be treated as if they're private, even though they're not. I don't see otherwise how. I mean, everything would fall apart if you tried. Right. Brian, thank you. I appreciate the support. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. You guys came through, as you always do. Ryan says, I think in reality, I would rather not pay anything through taxes for university. I want government out of education. Yes, of course. And of course, that solves these problems because then they're truly private. They can do whatever they want. Your money's not going towards them. They don't have to ask for your permission for everything. Ideally, everything is private. Right. I don't know what Joko's views on just war theory is. I wonder what his views are. That would be interesting. Yeah, don't watch Atlas Shrugged on Amazon Prime. Don't support that. It's a bad movie. It's not good. Hopefully, when they remake it, if they remake it, they make it much, much better. Much, much better. Nothing in the works right now. A lot of talk about it. Nothing actually happening yet. All right, guys. I like that, Harold. Harold says, conservatives, the state can only force private businesses to enact policies I like. Otherwise, they shouldn't intervene in business. Exactly right. Best friend Hank, there he is. Thanks you. Thanks for the support, guys. Thanks for another great fundraising show. The next show is on Sunday. It'll be hangout with $100 supporters. You can join that hangout if you sign up for $100 a month on Patreon or on Subscribestar or on YourOnBookShow.com/support. That'll be on Sunday. Then we've got a show Monday night. Then Wednesday, we've got the $25 supporters Q&A. And then I go to Ocon. And I'm trying to do at least 2 live shows from Ocon. Now, here's something. Is there anybody who's going to be at Ocon that you love to see me interview on my show? I could do it live. Is there anybody at Ocon, one of the speakers at Ocon, that you would love to see me interview? And maybe I can make that happen while I'm at Ocon. So let me know if you have any favorite speakers and you think that'd be good. Yeah, Peikoff's not going to be there. He has produced. I think there are going to be some surprises, but unfortunately, Peikoff will not be there. But Peikoff, you saw Peikoff did his lecture on operetta. You should all go watch the Peikoff lecture on operetta. My talk at Ocon is going to be basically in praise of Opa, Leonard Peikoff and Opa. It's gonna be a review of that. Tara's an option. That's great. Tal would be great. Okay. Tag team deathmatch with OSI. I don't know what that means. Thomas Aiden. No, he's not going to be there for the Opa salute. He doesn't travel anymore. He doesn't leave Southern California. Yeah, Greg will be there. Greg's presenting. Greg's doing a talk. Binswanger. Binswanger would be good. I might do Binswanger, though, on Zoom in a kind of quieter and do something in epistemology with him via Zoom. But we'll see. Maybe if I can come up with a good topic that we could kind of have a good banter about to do live in person would be fun. We'll see. If taxation is voluntary, then what's the problem with government schools? It's not the function of government. It's anti the function of government. Government should only do what its function is, and that's the protection of individual rights. Government schools are a perversion of that. So, no. All right, guys. Have a great night. See you soon. Bye.